Big time episode of the Unafraid Show, college football recap. I'm your boy, George Wrighster, and we got to talk about the reaction to the college football rankings and the bracket that came out. This is the No More Tears episode because winning a national championship has never been harder than it is in this expanded playoff era. Did the committee get the top 12 right? And Alabama is making threats to change their schedule. Okay, so what? We got to talk about SMU, Alabama, Texas, Indiana, and everything that went into that decision. And of course, it is recap Sunday. So we got to talk about those conference championship games and how we got here. That's coming up on the Unafraid Show. Make sure that you like, subscribe, get notifications, and tell a friend about the show. Let's get to it. Y'all make sure y'all hop in the comments today because this one is going to be spicy. The committee actually did it. They did it. They left Alabama out of the playoff. And honestly, this was right for the sport. And there's a lot of people on television that will try to tell you, oh, Alabama's got to be in. It's the SEC. No, you always do what is right for the sport, not what is right for television ratings, not what's right for because there's short-term games and then there's long-term games. And right now, the debate about who should be in, who should not be in, it is great for the sport. And college football is in the best position that it has ever been in. Ratings are going up, interest is going up, and it's not just in the traditional blue blood teams, and it's never been better. And right now, this year, winning a college football national championship, it has never been more difficult than it is right now. Never. You got the transfer portal, you got NIL, which are thinning rosters out a little bit. And now you have to win, depending on whether you have a bye or not, 3 or 4 games against top tier teams. And that has never happened. You used to just be able to just jump in, win a national championship with 1 or 2 games, depending on whether it was the BCS, and then you had the 14 playoff. But I look at this like Mike Tyson's Punch Out, a game that I used to play on my Nintendo a long time ago. You start out with Glass Joe, then you move up some people, then you end up playing King Hippo, Bald Bull, then you get down to the end, and then you got Mr. Sandman. And then at the very end, the final boss, Mr. Mike Tyson himself. It is a hard road. And this is where the coaches are going to earn their money, where they are going to earn their healthy paychecks. Them 2 comma checks, them 7-8 digit checks. This is where they earn it. Because keeping your team healthy, keeping your team focused, and keeping your team ready is going to be extremely difficult because the teams that played yesterday, right? They are going to play again on the 20th and the 21st. That's damn near 3 weeks between games. Well, really 2 weeks between games. And for the teams that didn't play in their conference championship games, that's 3 weeks in between games. So coaches have to be able to keep their teams engaged. They got to be able to keep them ready. And they are going to be studying multiple opponents at the same time. So it is going to be extremely difficult to win a national championship. And now there's going to be no more debate. One true champion. That's it. How can you debate it? No team that is left out of the playoffs now there's no undefeated teams left out. There's no conference champions left out. So there's no more debate. This is going to be the first time that we get a one true champion, and I love it. I am absolutely celebrating all over the place about this. And the thing that makes the playoffs so great is there's no 2019 LSU. There's no even 2022 Georgia. Now, even my Oregon Ducks, if they do not show up with their A game, they can get beat. But there is only one team this year that has passed all their tests. The Oregon Ducks passed all 13 games that they have gone up against. And there are some truths that have come out of this. And there are some truths about winning a national championship, especially in this expanded era with 3 to 4 teams. Well, with 3 to 4 games that you have to win. There are some absolute truths surrounding it. And that is that to win a national championship, your quarterback is going to have to be special at some point in time. That means that he's got to be the reason that you win. He's got to put the team on his back if you want to win 3 to 4 games. Because against this slate of lineups, one day your defense ain't going to show up the way that you want it to. Because, not because they're bad, but because somebody else comes up with some sort of scheme that puts you at a disadvantage, just like we saw with Oregon and Penn State. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But look at the quarterbacks in the college football playoff. We got Dylan Gabriel. Do you trust him? He's been aces in big moments. Look at Kevin Jennings over at SMU. Will Howard over at Ohio State. Quinn Ewers at Texas. You got a question mark at Georgia with Carson Beck and Gunnar Stockton. But do you even trust Carson Beck to begin with? Do you trust Ewers? Sam Levitt over at Arizona State. Cade Klubnik at Clemson. Drew Aller at Penn State. Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. Which quarterbacks do you trust if you have to win a game, if your defense don't show up and you need him to be absolute aces and have a big game, not miss reads, not be inaccurate on throws, hit the big one, stand there and get hit in the pocket? Who do you trust the most? And you guys leave that in the comments. What quarterbacks do you absolute trust the most? Hop in there and make sure that you guys share this with a friend who loves college football like you love college football. And so I wanted to go to the playoff bracket, right? Because the bracket is the thing that people have absolutely been talking about. And there is a question mark about who's in, who's out, and and the records and everything in between. So let's look at, actually, I'm gonna switch this one out because I don't love this one as much. I'm going to go with the on-3 graphic. I think that one's a little bit more clear for everybody. So we have Ohio State playing Tennessee. In Ohio State, winner plays Oregon. Notre Dame playing Indiana. Winner plays Georgia. Penn State playing SMU. And the winner plays Boise State. And then you got Texas playing Clemson. And then the winner plays Arizona State. And when we look at the lines for the opening ceremony, well, for the opening round of the college football playoff, you got Texas versus Clemson. That is an 11-point line in Texas's favor. Tennessee versus Ohio State. Ohio State's favored by 7.5. SMU Penn State. Penn State's favored by 8.5. And Indiana Notre Dame. Notre Dame has opened up as 8-point favorites. And a lot of people get stuck in betting lines. They're like, oh man, see, this team they shouldn't be, and they would not be favored versus this. Alabama was, 3 touchdown favorites versus Oklahoma. They were 2 or 3 touchdown favorites against Vanderbilt too. Florida was a huge underdog to Ole Miss. It doesn't matter. Oh, hell, Michigan was a 3 touchdown dog to Ohio State. It happens all the time. And this was my argument when the playoff was going to be expanded. And people told me, George, there's no way there will be upsets. It'll be the same people. That's not the case. It's not going to be, and there will be upsets. Are some of the big name brands going to win? 100%. But the beauty of this is that they have to go on the road to do it sometimes. So ain't no more just sticking in your silo, playing neutral site games every time. Nah, man, you got to get it with your muscle. You got to sometimes go into the snow if you are SMU and play in that cold weather against Penn State. Is that going to be easy? Absolutely not. But if you want to win a national championship, it is not going to be easy. But I will say this, and there's been some talk about brackets and this isn't fair, and oh, there have been people that have said that the four that the top four teams ranked 1 to 4, that those are the teams that should get the bye, should not be the conference champions. That take that idea, ball it up, and throw it in the trash. Take that idea and throw it in the trash because conference championships have to matter. And that was the thing that people thought was going to get lost in this whole playoff thing. No, conference championships having extreme value is the thing that keeps the regular season, the energy around the regular season. Because this year we saw how many teams were not out of the college football playoff as the season went on. But the biggest question is, and there have been people who have caping in, and I don't believe that it's genuine. They've been saying, "Oh, see, look, look at Oregon's road. They got to play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. Maybe the easiest path is what Penn State has with SMU and Boise State." Are we sure? Because styles make fights in college football and college basketball. That's why we see upsets in the college basketball tournament. It's not because, you know, Florida Gulf Coast is better than Alabama. It's not that, any of the smaller teams are better than the bigger teams in terms of being more talented. No, it is a particular style. It is the gravity of the moment and all of those things that factor into it that cause teams to lose. And there's no crying aloud. And people like, well, Oregon has a tough. So what? Check ball. Check ball. You play who shows up. Never been people, well, what? They're going to have to play Ohio State. Ohio State has to earn the right to play Oregon again. Just like Tennessee has to earn the right to play it. Styles make fights. And the thing that you saw last time is not going to be the thing you see this time. Things change, particularly when you have so much time to prepare for a game. So I don't want to hear it. People talk, oh, Oregon's schedule is so hard. Now, I will say, though, when and if I am a part of deciding what is best for college football, the tweak that I would make to this whole seeding and bracket situation is one huge thing. Is that after the first round of games, I would reseed. And you might be asking, George, why would you reseed? It's because the number one team should always get to play the lowest seeded team. So if Clemson beats Texas, Oregon should get to play Clemson instead of playing the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. Same way that if Clemson lost, right? And then SMU wins. Oregon should get to play SMU. Now, that does not mean that that's going to be an easier game, but there should be some reward to being the number one overall seed. Now, I don't believe that there should be any crying because it just is what it is. Some years stuff works out, some years it doesn't. Some days it's bad luck, sometimes it is not. Now, there have been a lot of people that have been crying about strength of schedule when it comes to Alabama getting left out. And we'll get to that in just a second. But I do want to talk about the matchups that I like the most and where I early indications of potential upsets. I'm looking at Penn State SMU because they do not believe that SMU can beat them. They do not. Nobody is believing in them. And people have not fully understood that SMU has stood on business on defense for pretty much all of this year. Their offense has been phenomenal, and it's what led the comeback against Clemson, but it was their defense that stopped Clemson from scoring as many points either. And SMU has just played a big game that had a lot of gravity to it, even though they just lost. So they are going to be better conditioned to going into Happy Valley and putting up a competitive game. And also, I want to point out that Texas Clemson game, prime location for an upset. Prime location because Quinn Ewers, even though he threw for a lot of yards in the SEC championship, there is something about it that's not just gelling in terms of seeing extremely great play out of him when the moments get the biggest. So those are my two potential upsets so far, but we'll cover it as soon as we get closer and closer to it. But how did we get here though? Because there's been a lot of harping on strength of schedule. They have turned this talk into like election talk, and we just finished a damn election. It has turned into election talk, misinformation, disinformation. I'm using the stats and metrics that favor me. I am using the stats and metrics that make my case. Because all we hear from ESPN, the SEC folks, strength of schedule, strength of schedule, strength of schedule. Well, how about strength of record? Y'all don't want to talk about that. Y'all don't want to talk about how the FPI is broken. Don't want to talk about that. And it is because there is a giant target that says whoever you're in bed with, that's who you're going to talk about. Fox is going to big up the Big Ten way more. ESPN is going to big up the SEC more. And they have more SEC people on the network as well. So this is the reason why things work like that. And one of the things that I noticed was, right, there has been a lot of talk about these schedules and about Indiana and about Indiana, SMU, strength of schedule. But nobody talks about the fact that Texas won the scheduling roulette in the SEC, and they didn't have to play a schedule that looked like Georgia's at all. Would they have navigated that? Who knows? Some years you are going to win it, and some years you are not going to win that scheduling roulette. Now, the thing, though, that the television has said that is 1,000,000,000% true, and I've been harping on this for years, is that there must be uniform scheduling in college football. There should be no November cupcakes allowed because you'll have the committee saying Alabama won 2 of their last 3 games. Miami didn't. Well, they played Mercer too. They weren't going to lose that football game, so they really only had to win 1 out of 2. Whereas Miami was playing ACC games. So it's different. And schedules, now you can try to make schedules as uniform as you want to, but you can't account for teams like Utah losing all their quarterbacks and being bad this year. You can't account for what happened to Florida State, a top 10 team coming into the season. You can't account for Oklahoma being as bad as they were and losing all their wideouts and being 6-6. You can't account for that. So you can try to make schedules as balanced as you want. But the way that you do that, it is not by letting the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC generate their own schedules. College football needs a commissioner and an office that makes a uniform schedule throughout the country. Yes, you will play your conference games, but they will determine the number of conference games you play, whether that number is 8, whether that number is 9, or whether that number is 10. But whatever the number is, there needs to be some uniformity and consistency on it. And yes, sometimes you are going to lose out because a team like SMU rises up, or Colorado turns out to be better, or BYU is good, Arizona State. So then your schedule is going to get a lot tougher. It just is what it is, but there needs to be an attempt because Georgia's schedule should not look that tough. And then, Texas isn't. But Texas can't control that Michigan was bad this year because Texas has 0 top 25 wins right now. But this whole talk about, Alabama got left out and and this is terrible. You are judging it by the logo because people didn't in the SEC, they didn't feel sorry for Florida State last year, and Florida State jumped through all their 13 hurdles last year. They were 13-0 and got left out. And Alabama kept themselves out of the playoffs. Nobody kept Alabama out. They had 3 losses and 2 of them to bad teams. They lost to Oklahoma as a huge favorite. They lost to Vanderbilt as a huge favorite. And they lost to Tennessee. The Tennessee game you can explain away, but that's it. But at what point in time can we admit the SEC just didn't have 4 special teams this year? They didn't. And I don't want to hear any crying about Alabama not being in the college football playoff because they controlled their own destiny. And they started the season inside the top 10. They got the Alabama logo. Every time they lost those 2 bad losses, do you think that they fell out of the top 15? No. So they had plenty of opportunity. But then you had their athletic director, Greg Burns, threaten, oh man, listen, maybe we'll change our non-conference scheduling to make sure that you lost to conference opponents. What are you talking about? Your conference schedule this year helped you. Wisconsin, your non-conference helped you. It was not difficult this year. You had South Florida, who is a good, decent football team. Don't have a quarterback who can throw the football. That was a guaranteed win. You played Mercer. You played Western Kentucky, who you overpower both of those teams. And you played Wisconsin, whose quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke, got hurt literally on the first or second drive. So don't sit here and tell me that, oh, we're going to change our schedule. So what? Go change your schedule. It's not like you're playing the toughest non-conference schedule either. And then maybe one of those years, that'll come to bite you in the ass. And then you'll be just screaming about something else. We don't want to hear it. This is the No Tears episode of the Unafraid Show. And you guys make sure that you guys like, subscribe, hop in the comments, and leave it and share with a friend. Now, before we get to the games, there was the debate about SMU versus Alabama versus Texas versus Boise State. And I talked about it, about Texas, because they keep bringing up SMU. They keep bringing up Indiana. Their schedule's not the same. Indiana didn't have to play Penn State. They didn't have to play Oregon. But they did play Ohio State. Well, Texas has not beaten one currently ranked top 25 team, and nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about that. Let's look for a second real quick about Texas's and SMU's resumes. They're both 11-2. They're both 0-2 versus top 25 teams. And Texas A&M's best win is against 8-4 Texas A&M, and SMU's best win is against 9-3 Duke. And if your argument is that SMU should be out of the field, then maybe Texas should be out of the field too. I'm just saying. Yeah, and remember, styles make fights. They keep telling us that Penn State's got the easiest road in the college football playoff. Are we sure? Because Penn State is 1-24 versus AP top 5 opponents since 2000. And James Franklin has lost 11 straight games against top 5 teams. Come on, man. What are we talking about? All right. But now, on to the games from this weekend, how we got to them. This is the conference championship games and how we got there. We are going to start with Oregon versus Penn State, a game that I was absolutely at. We got videos from the sideline. We got all sorts of stuff coming out this week from the game. Now, this is the first time in college football history a team has beaten Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State in the same season. It has never happened. And even if you take the Michigan State out, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, are you kidding me? Remember, this is the same team that people say, oh, Oregon's not going to be ready for the Big Ten. Oh, those Pac-12 teams. Oh, do you think USC and Oregon are going to come in here Do anything? Ha ha ha. Well, they came in here and put their feet up on the damn couch, and Charlie Murphy from the True Hollywood Stories of Rick James, F your couch, came up here doing donuts on your grass, parking on your lawn. Just took over the Big Ten. They's the captains now. But the question was, George, were you nervous in this game? So I was at the game, and this was a 45-37 game. This game was 31-24 at halftime. If you had told me that this game would be 34-20, would be 31-24 at halftime, I would have had you committed to a mental hospital. I would have been like, listen, stop the day drinking. Herm Edwards, lay off the weed because whatever you smoking, it ain't the regular. You smoking something real deep in these streets, man. But the question was I ever nervous? Okay, I'm gonna read something to you that popped up on because I had my Apple Watch on while I was there at the game. Here is what my Apple Watch popped up during the tell you the exact time. This was at 9:40. What does it say? Oh, at 9:24 p.m. So the game started at 8 o'clock. So then so 9:24. This is before halftime even. Oh wait, no, because the game, yeah. So this is after halftime. Yes, this is after halftime, and it says from my Apple Watch, high heart rate. Your heart rate rose above 120 beats per minute while you seem to be inactive for 10 minutes, starting at 9:24. Yes, yes, this was stressful. This was nowhere near the way that I expected this game to go. When Oregon got that pick and went up 28-10, I thought the game was over. I thought we were blowout city. But credit to Penn State. And Penn State, whose offense I have much maligned this season, their new offensive coordinator, Colt Nicky, who came over from Kansas, his game plan was spectacular and it was superb. Now, there's a lot of people that will point to this and they'll say, oh my God, Oregon's defense was so bad. Yes, it was bad on some level because they gave up 297 rushing yards. Now, the 54 to Drew Aller, I don't really count as bad because those were just like stumbling scrambles. But they gave up 14 for 124 and 10 for 105 to Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. That was horrendous. But this was because of what the offensive coordinator did. If you go back and watch Penn State's game, there's a little bit of hurry up, but this was nowhere near what they did in this game. Every time, well, almost every time, Penn State would call a play on first down and then immediately come up to the no matter whether it was a 0-yard gain, 50-yard gain, 10-yard gain, they would go immediately on the ball and run another play. And you're like, George, that's common. No. Pay attention to what they did. They didn't signal in anything. As soon as the ball was set, they were ready to go. They were calling 2 plays in the huddle. And Oregon had a really good game plan to try to stop Ty Warren and to make sure that they got lined up the way that they wanted to in man coverage. Well, Penn State's speed nerfed that. It did not allow it to happen. And if you don't know what nerfing is, think about a Nerf gun compared to a regular gun. If you put Nerf bullets in it, it ain't really gonna hurt you. So that's why I said they nerfed the defense. This was a fantastic game plan because they knew that they have to protect Drew Aller. Drew Aller was not going to be able to just drop back and throw the ball against Oregon. Number one, Oregon's pass rush was going to be too good. And number two, he's just okay. They keep blaming all their wide receivers, but them dudes caught the ball yesterday. I do believe that they're not spectacular out wide, but they are absolutely good enough to make plays. And this offensive scheme for Penn State, it kept the Ducks off balance. The speed didn't allow them to get lined up. They got way too many yards for Oregon's taste in the run game. And Ty Warren trying to figure out where he was all day was an absolute just like there were times Oregon, two of the touchdowns that Penn State scored, Oregon wasn't even lined up properly. Literally was not lined up properly at all. Just free runners all over the place because they were trying to do it. So this is where Tosh Lapoy and Dan Lanning at halftime had to say, all right, look, we're going to stop all this flip-flopping around. We just got to just rotate our safeties and figure it out instead of trying to run people around and switching them because now we're getting lost. And that was the reason why the scoring was significantly lower in the second half. After scoring, 24 points in the first half, Penn State scored 13. After scoring 31, the Oregon then scored 14. Now, this Oregon offense and what Will Stein did in this game, spectacular too. Spectacular. The thing that he did that was excellent, and if you go back and watch the film, you will see the way he figured out and understood whether it was early film study and it was an adjustment during the game. He was able to create formations and motions because if you notice, they didn't cross over motion a ton. They did a little bit, but it was a lot of return motions out to make sure that the linebackers that were sitting in the middle of the field were going to have to vacate. And it was Dylan Gabriel's legs also that caused Penn State to have to spy him at times. And that's why Tez Johnson was able to work the middle of the field to a tune of 11 catches, 181 yards, and a touchdown. And that's why he was the MVP of the game. But you could have given it to Dylan Gabriel too, 22 for 32 for 283 and 4 touchdowns, no turnovers in the biggest game of the whole season. And when you look at the plays that he made, like that fourth down play to T Ferg, or was it the big third down, fourth down play at the end of the game to Terrence Ferguson? Hell of a throw. He sat there, stood in there, took a hit. Was fantastic. Was fantastic. It was one of those games that you say, oh man, the offense put the defense on its back. Because remember the Wisconsin game, it was the other way around. The defense put the offense on its back, then the offense was able to make a play when it mattered the most. And that's exactly what this defense did at the end with that Nico Reed pick. Now, I will ask, people have asked me, George, are you concerned about Oregon's defense? Because Boise State ran on them very well, but Ashton Jeanty, the dudes just couldn't tackle them. They were getting hands on them in the backfield. They just couldn't tackle them. And Penn State ran all over them. I do believe, and this could be rose-colored glasses a little bit, but I don't think so because I believe that Penn State did not believe that they could line up, that they could just huddle up, line up, and just run their plays. That Oregon's defense was too good because they did some things that they were always, fake sweep in and all this stuff to keep the pass rush away from Drew Aller as well. That if they just line up, but I do believe that they're going to be able, and they being Oregon, put together a game plan for if a team does this to them again. That way they can get their calls off and everything else. But Penn State going this fast, it did come at a cost because their wide receivers in the fourth quarter were absolutely gassed. Ty Warren was literally walking off the line in the middle of the fourth quarter, just exhausted. Same thing with Harrison Wallace and Amari Evans. They were exhausted. They just were. So if you are going to switch up what you do, sometimes there is a cost. I sat in the bar after the game, And I was talking to some longtime Penn State fans. Like they were like, we've had season tickets since Joe Paterno. I asked them how do they feel about James Franklin. The fact that he is, 1-14 against AP top 5 teams, that he's lost 11 straight against them. And they were confused. They're like, yo, he's a good coach, but he's more the CEO of it. And he lets his coaches do a lot of the coaching. Whereas some head coaches are more involved in it. I think that James Franklin is a very good head coach, but at some point in time, people want you to cross over into the promised land. And we live in a society where people want microwave results. I hope that this does not in any way impact their boosters, their donors, and the people that believe in this program because they traveled extremely well. They had they little light things. They were loud. This almost felt like a Penn State home game. Now, granted, playing in Indianapolis is significantly closer. It was only 500 miles to get there, as opposed to 2,000 and something from Eugene, Oregon. And they traveled extremely well. They did their thing. Next game up, Texas and Georgia. Oh, the mighty SEC championship. The mighty SEC championship, 22-19 in overtime. The Georgia Bulldogs won. Now, if you look at the stats of this game, Quinn Ewers, 358 yards on 46 attempts. 1 touchdown, not one, but 2 interceptions. And that looked much like what he did in the first game against Georgia. He was completely overwhelmed. And they were able to move the ball from like 25 to 25. All sorts of yards. But once they got inside of that low red area, everything changed. Is it Georgia's defense that stiffened up? Or is it that Quinn Ewers likes to play fast and free and be able to have a lot of space to just throw the ball up to one-on-one matchups and have guys like Matthew Golden and Moore and Silas Bolden, those guys win their matchups? That's the question. Because this game was a huge missed opportunity for Texas. And it is clear that this team can't beat Georgia this season. And this game actually left us with many more questions than it did answers, not just about Texas, but about Georgia as well. Because Carson Beck had that injury. And when I first saw it, now, I'm not a doctor, right? However, I've seen a lot of injuries. And that injury reminded me a lot of the Brock Purdy injury against the Eagles in the playoffs where he tore his UCL. Because he got hit and pulled while the ball was coming forward. And that's a lot of stress on that elbow and on that shoulder. Now, the fact that they were being so secretive about that injury, it leads you to believe that it could be worse. But the questions about Georgia at quarterback aren't just that if Gunnar Stockton has to play on New Year's Day. That's not the question. The question is about Carson Beck as well, because he has looked absolutely mid this year. He went through a stretch where his confidence was down, throwing all sorts of interceptions and everything else. So Georgia was having to play around him already. Now, there were some times that he made some big plays to Oscar Delp and all of them, but that's not what happened in this game. And Gunnar Stockton came in. He did the best that he could do. 12 for 16, 71 yards, no touchdowns, and a horrendous interception. Horrendous. But this is a case of Georgia locked it down. And Texas's offense, for some reason, that when it gets against better teams, we saw the same thing against Washington last year in the college football playoff. When they get into the low red area, they can't score. Maybe, and there's a lot of Texas fans because I was on their message boards. I've been all year. And remember, this is actually coming full circle. So I'll take all the apologies at this point. About halfway through the season, actually in the preseason, and then about halfway through the season, when Carson Beck got hurt, I'm sorry, when Quinn Ewers got hurt and Arch Manning came in. I said there was a quarterback controversy that part of the team, even in the preseason, thought that Arch should be the quarterback. And then after Quinn Ewers got hurt, same thing, because he played really well. And there's a difference. He is a significantly better athlete than Quinn Ewers is. Like Quinn Ewers he's a semi-threat with his legs, but not a real threat. So, and Quinn Ewers already has the ankle as well. And there is something about I'm trying to put nail it down about Quinn Ewers, because the numbers, the pure passing yards look good, right? But overall, when you watch him play, it just hasn't looked as clean and as special as you feel like you need for a guy that's projected. Well, that some people were projecting to be a first round pick. I've talked to scouts. Nobody has a first round grade on him right now. Neither on Carson Beck either. So Quinn may either be in the transfer portal or be going to the NFL as not a first round pick. Potential same ending for Carson Beck over there at Georgia as well. Because there's all the talent in the world with Quinn Ewers, but something is missing. It's like when I watch Jackson Dart, I see it and I'm like, ooh, good job. And then sometimes I'm like, ooh, I don't know what that. It's like getting 85% of what you want. And then that last 15%, you're like, where is it? And this is a game, missed opportunities for Texas. They started out the game. Field goal, missed field goal. You cannot beat Georgia like that. You have to score touchdowns. They had a 70% drive rate success in terms of how far that they're able to move the ball, how many yards. They were driving up and down the field between the 25s. And at halftime, Georgia only had 50-something yards and a hurt quarterback. But the thing that Georgia did, 15 tackles for loss. Because if you get Texas behind the sticks, the offense just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. But I do have to give Kirby Smart a lot of credit. He don't play scared. No guts, no glory. Fortune favors the aggressive in college football. Hell, anywhere in life, fortune favors the aggressive. And Kirby, with that fake punt in his own territory, he's got his backup quarterback in. He knows they got no momentum, and he's like, call it. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. All right, next game up. We got SMU versus Clemson. I got to give Dabo Swinney a lot of credit because he's being rewarded for sticking to who he is. He hasn't been in the transfer portal, recruiting out of high school, trying to develop, and everybody who would listen has been trying to tell this man, don't do it that way. But now he has a trip to the college football playoff and a date with the Texas Longhorns, the aforementioned Texas Longhorns. So he's winning. He's getting what he wants. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. 100% credit. And this game was the doomsday scenario for Alabama. Because SMU came all the way back in this game. And this was a game that at one point in time was 21-7. And SMU scored 17 fourth quarter points. That young man, Kevin Jennings, came and brought him back 300 yards, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then that pick he had earlier. Bravo. Bravo. And I believe that SMU had not, because remember here on the Unafraid Show when we do the recaps, there's a segment that I always talk about when it says the games that mattered but nobody watched, or the teams that nobody's talking about that matter, and that's SMU. People have not been watching them play. And so that means that their games have not had the pomp and circumstance surrounding it that a lot of these other teams have faced. So when this game started against Clemson for the ACC championship, they were like a deer in headlights. And they had to wake up, put some smelling salts, or somebody had to come in and slap, like, wake up, wake up, snap out of it. And they did. So credit to them, credit to their head coach, Rhett Lashley, because this team has some fight. And Clemson tried to park the bus, and that's a soccer term for trying to take the air out of the football, trying to end the game. And SMU was like, nah, fam. And if SMU's kickoff coverage team was better after they got it tied up 31-31, that game goes to overtime, and we don't know what happens. And then Alabama may be in the college football playoff. But huge props to Clemson. The 56-yard field goal, career long, to get into the college football playoff. Congratulations. Now, and if he can go upset Texas, oh boy, y'all, if y'all think Dabo was unwilling to change then, oh, he'll never. Like, why would I change it? Works. And I have said that I give the dude credit for being who he is, and I do think that there is something to recruiting out of high school and then standing on business and saying, we're not going to run from development like Mike Tomlin says over at the Pittsburgh Steelers. We are going to get our guys and develop them. So I love that part of it. But I also agree that you got to get in the portal a little bit. All right, last game that we got to talk about from the weekend is Arizona State versus Iowa State. This was 100% belt to ass. This was 100% belt to ass. It was 45-19. Hell, it was 45-10 going into the fourth quarter. Because on the first drive, you thought, okay, Arizona State goes down and scores. And then Iowa State was just cutting through them with the run. And then all of that stopped. All of that stopped. Arizona State ended up only allowing 4 yards of carry. And on the other side, their dudes were fantastic. They were without their best their best receiving threat in Jordan Tyson, who's out with a broken collarbone. But Cam Scatterboo, man, if y'all don't stop, 16 for 170 and 2 touchdowns, 53-yard long. The dude was incredible. He did exactly what he's been doing all season, carrying the team on his back. Sam Levitt did a good job. 12 for 17, 219, and 3 touchdowns. But the big credit that I want to give to is Kenny Dillingham, their head coach, because he has gotten this group of dudes who were picked last to believe that they can do it, to believe that no matter who lines up across from them, they have a chance to win. So while everybody is sitting here thinking that it is going to be easy work with them at the 4 seed, for that they're going to be mincemeat for either Texas or Clemson, whoever they play. Oh yeah, y'all got another thing coming, buddy, because on January the 1st, when they play Wednesday, January the 1st, when they play in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl down at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, if you think that this team is going to get walked over by Texas or Clemson, you got another thing coming. This is just not how this team is built. This just ain't even how Kenny Dillingham is built. Such a young head coach. I think he's the youngest head coach in college football right now. And there's a thing about being young, because sometimes when you're young, you're too stupid to be scared. Sometimes when you're young, you're too stupid to understand that we shouldn't be here. And you just go out and play like your hair's on fire. They got nothing to lose. They were picked last. So if they go out with the same defensive effort, the same offensive effort, they got a shot. People call it easy path. All right, easy my ass. But you guys, though, that's the Unafraid Show college football championship weekend recap and college football, playoff bracket preview and reaction. Make sure that you guys like, subscribe, Tell a friend about the Unafraid Show. And most importantly, get notifications. Peace out. We will catch you later on this week. And we will be on Bleacher Report this week as well. So make sure you guys check it out. Peace out.